Hello and welcome to episode 18 of the Western Bulldogs podcast, Barclay Street, brought to you, of course, every week by our friends at Mercedes-Benz Vans. And it is always my pleasure to sit with this man, the skipper, the head honcho, the King Bulldog himself, Marcus Bontempelli. Bont, how are you, man?
Going well, mate, and I must say the pleasure is all mine to always be sitting in your company. Mostly week after week. At times we've had a spell or two, but I'm
You got to
going I'm
freshen
going
up, yeah.
okay, mate.
Now,
I just need a little one.
we talked about this last week that we had a bit of a spell from Barclay Street, just to freshen up. Everyone needs a mid-year freshen up, and
Of course,
that,
yeah.
that coincided with a bit of a losing streak.
Siesta.
Podcast back on last week. Dogs back on the
Mm-hmm.
winners list. What do you
Uncanny,
say to that?
uncanny.
Yeah.
That's uncanny how that's worked out, mate. So we might have to just pencil them in, I reckon, for especially the next month. We need obviously a couple of wins and just to keep pushing ourselves up there. So this looks like the winning recipe.
What did you make of the weekend? Because the Crows are clearly struggling. They haven't been able to jag a win this year. But there's always pressure in AFL footy. It just changes shade. And so when you
Yeah,
come up against a side like the Crows, there is a bit of that. There is a bit of the reverse pressure of you have to win, and it's
yeah.
not as big a reward as there are on other teams to get the 4 points. But how did you feel like
Yeah.
the group navigated their way through it?
Yeah, I think pretty well. I think based on what I think Adelaide was able to produce the last couple of weeks, they've been, I think, a lot more competitive, especially with their effort and whatnot, probably around the ball and their ability to sort of pressure and put teams under the pump a little bit. Looks like they pushed Collingwood. I think they pushed the D's a little bit in the sort of couple of weeks before. So you just. And you know this as you've spent a lot of time in the league, that you're sort of preparing for each team's sort of best. But we're obviously coming off a couple of losses in a row, sort of really needing a win to just get us back on the straight and narrow. And you're right, there is this little bit of sort of reverse pressure about not being the team, obviously, that goes down to the Crows or doesn't produce their best. So you got to see it as an opportunity to sort of let everything sort of try and play as freely as possible, so that you can let the best sort of come out. So I think the boys, were really prepared, attacked it well, and I think ultimately in these games you just want to start really well, and that sort of seems to set you off on the right direction. So I think we managed to start the game pretty well, and albeit a couple little patches where we didn't get things perfect or turn the ball over and they scored, I think across the board the game was sort of played on our terms for a fair bit.
Nice to have the big guy up at full forward there doing his thing.
Oof, oof, wowee, wowee. We've seen moments and games like that from Aaron in the past, when he's sort of running and jumping, but he has sort of missed a fair chunk of football with the ankle injury, and even then come back, really pushed himself to get back and out there. So to see him in that sort of form, and Daniel Talia, who's a really recognised key defender,
Mm.
really good one-on-one defender, for sort of Aaron to be able to play the way that he did, and obviously kick the goals that he did. But he's such a good pressure player, Aaron. That's the thing that maybe sometimes eludes people of his ability to obviously take a good clunk, but he commits in all sort of what we call phases. So his pressure that he creates, we actually score a lot from and keep the ball inside our 50. So he's not just all the high flying marks. He does do the things that, from a team perspective, you want to see from especially your big guys. It's just awesome.
Mm. And how about your own form, mate? You had a heap of the ball and a fairly big impact on the game. Must have been nice to be part of that midfield group on the weekend.
Yeah, it was. And we probably, all at different points had periods of influence. You saw probably Bailey Smith as well, who had some sort of enormous metres gain numbers, which are really important in territory games, but just being able to keep the ball in your half. So we all were able to contribute in different ways. But from a personal perspective, you always enjoyed playing well and being able to influence the game throughout. And I probably haven't been able to have as many of those games probably this season. It's been challenging at times. And even from a group form perspective, we haven't probably played as well as that consistently. So you're always a bit of a byproduct of how the team's going as well. So it was definitely good to feel that way, but we had an enormous amount of contributors, mate.
Can I ask you about Bailey Smith? For a player with such a flamboyant hairdo, and for someone who gets so much of the ball, he still almost flies under the radar a little bit. Maybe because of the high profile nature of the other players he was drafted in.
Mm,
So there's a whole group of them coming through at the same time. But how impressed
yep.
are you watching him up close day in and day out?
Yeah, super impressive. He walked in already a sort of ultimate professional. Like he was sort of in a way with his focus and attitude towards the game, and his body and physically sort of put a few of our sort of more senior players to shame a little bit, mate. And you'd probably know which ones I'm talking about. And his ability to just continue to try and get the best out of himself is super impressive. And I think you start to see that from a regularity point of view and a consistency point of view on field, because he might fly under the radar maybe from a league perspective and not within our sort of four walls, because he's incredibly clean, he's incredibly skillful, he moves up and down the ground so well. He's such a good transition player, and he's barely missed a beat really, which is also super impressive as a young player to play as much as he has. Is just super impressive. So he's continuing to search for more and more and try to find out how much of a better player or more influential player he can be. But we're really benefiting from his ability at the minute.
And the footy frenzy, as it's become to be
Mm,
known, has come to an end.
yes,
Is it? Are you
the
sort of
first instalment.
is there? Yeah, you're sort of relieved to have gotten through that big chunk of games and
Yeah,
physically intact.
I think so. Like, I think there's been maybe a few little stress injuries and stuff starting to pop up throughout the league after the last sort of couple of weeks, which I think was always going to be on the radar of sort of medical departments of probably following this sort of couple of weeks of football and training and what that would do to bodies and even sort of mentally how you're feeling. But obviously our sort of couple of weeks wasn't as nice as we would have liked it to be. It wasn't as rewarding because we did take obviously a couple of losses and only picked up the one win. But a couple of those games we weren't far off, and we only had patches of small lapses, which hurt us eventually in the end. But I think from a mental and physical perspective, it's that we've definitely been able to manage it pretty well, and certainly feeling now like I can attack the next sort of whatever it is 4 weeks with no real sort of inhibition. So that's been pretty good. I'm keen to hear what about from your perspective as an outsider, sort of looking in and watching as a viewer of the game and commentator, I guess, as you'd like. How have you found it watching? Has it been too much from a viewing perspective, or have you found that it's been a good fix?
I think in the context of the year and just being in stage 4 in Melbourne, all in all,
Yeah.
it was kind of nice, to be honest, to have
Okay.
something on every night and a bit of a distraction. There were a few times when it would be because my working life is talking about football, and so
Of course. Yeah.
put the headphones down,
Yeah.
walk out the hallway, and just put the TV on and watch another game. It was
Yeah.
there were a couple of times where it was a bit you sort of just like
Yeah. Yeah.
sort of it was a bit of a
Just
grind,
getting
but
through 'em.
really,
Yeah.
yeah, but for the most part, it was kind of nice to have something to do and a distraction.
So,
So
so from then, did you find it? Obviously, you're talking to football a lot. Did you find it with more games that easier because there was more things to talk about on a day-to-day basis, or did you find it a bit numbing? It was like, oh, there's another thing and another thing,
no,
or
it was probably the former where
yeah,
every day, especially with the standalone games, it was
yeah,
like
yeah,
you know how there's a certain microscope on Friday night footy.
yeah,
It did kind of feel like if there was just the one game on,
mm,
it felt like everyone in Melbourne or anyone with an interest in footy in Melbourne was watching it. So
yeah,
there was all eyes on. So the next day, talking about it on radio, there was real interest and buy-in and dissecting
yeah,
it, and
yeah,
you know how the machine works of who played
yeah,
well, who struggled, who's under
mm,
pressure, what was the big moment, that kind of thing. So
yeah,
um, yeah, from that point of view, it was yeah, I think it was a success.
mm,
Whether you could do it every year, I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure about that, but I wonder if there'll be little patches now of where you guys might be playing sort of little clusters of games here and there, but
Yep.
we'll wait and see because I'm sure the TV ratings would have been massive, so
Yeah.
that drives a lot of this, as you know.
Yep.
Can I ask you a question? How conscious are you as skipper? So a month ago, you had a big 3-week challenge coming up. There was what was it? The Tigers, Port Adelaide, and Brisbane.
Brisbane. Yep.
You had a good look at 2 of those sides. Tigers blew you out of the water.
Yep.
But you have to put across of failed that test of these are 3 contenders. Where are we sitting? You get over the Crows on the weekend, and the next 3 are the Demons, who are on, they've built momentum. They're sort of on the charge at the moment, the Demons. Then the Cats, who are flying, and the Eagles, who are always a force. Have you sort of circled this 3 in your own minds of this is a big challenge of where we sit?
Yeah, I definitely think, well, that's the case for me. Definitely. Like, you look at those previous 3 games, it's probably a bit of a maturity test in a way. Like, we've still got a strong contingent of young players who, we rely heavily on sort of week to week to produce their best. And, one of the biggest challenges in football, especially as a young player, is the concentration side of it. It was something that you were always able to do really well, especially when I was a young lad, sort of in my first couple of years. You pick up on the moments where players might be drifting, or they might have fallen out of the game, or they're just sort of coasting through certain parts of the game. And I always remember it was a really strong asset that you had as a player, was to pick up on that and keep what we sometimes call the revs high, so that you're not sort of dipping too low and then fall out of the game. And that's something we probably haven't done well enough in those previous 3 weeks. We haven't been able to play the game on its merits for the whole sort of quarter and whole half, and then make it into a whole game. So at different parts, we've had little lapses, and it's really cost us. Teams have got to run on. They've kicked momentum sort of bags of 3 or 4 goals, and that's just in these shorter games enough to gap you and make it really challenging to come back. So with that in mind, I think the fact that we've had that as a good learning experience should help us and hold us in better stead, so that when we do face these teams who are going to be obviously better at playing the game, minute to minute and quarter to quarter, we have to be prepared to do that for longer. So it presents, like you said, as a good challenge. And obviously, based on where we are, we clearly need to win as many games as possible out of the next however many. So yeah, it's a challenge, but one I look forward to, that's for sure.
I just think there's something in the clarity of the next 3 weeks that I'm just having a look at the ladder now. So we sit. So we're 10th on the ladder outside by percentage. You come up against 3 really good teams. It just cuts out the ambiguity. Like, it really is. Let's see how good this group is, because finished, was it 7th last year, made the finals, bundled out in a disappointing final. So we get to see whether we've moved forward or whether we've stepped back. So there's something in that clarity, I reckon.
I agree. And then once again, good teams who are all in pretty good form as well. And we have to use, I think, the confidence we can take out of the previous game, but also understanding that we're playing different sort of teams, a different team in terms of this week. So take as much positive out of that, but understand we probably won't get as much freedom or as much probably dominance against Melbourne as what we maybe did against the Crows. So that's where I think the mindset for this week has to be really quite steely and understanding that was that, and now this is this. So that's where I think we'll sort of focus will be squarely fixed, mate.
Yeah, well, for Bulldog supporters, we can't wait. All eyes will be on, mate. We're in your corner as always, so can't wait to see what you and the boys can produce. We'll have a little break, but after this little break, I'm very excited, and I know you're excited, because I don't think you've ever met or spoken with Michael Magic McLean, but I have on a couple of occasions, and it is always a privilege. One of the great Bulldogs and a Brisbane Bear, and a member of the Indigenous team of the century. So He's a legend of the AFL and of football in the Northern Territory, and they've got a big couple of weeks coming up. So we'll have a little break, and then when we come back, we'll introduce the man with the greatest nickname in football history, Michael
What a zinger.
Magic McLean. We're coming right back. Welcome back to the Western Bulldogs podcast, Barclay Street. Marcus, I mean, I know you are Bulldog royalty, premiership player, best and fairest captain, blah, 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 blah. But you are not Marcus Magic Bontempelli. And the next guest, he is Michael Magic McLean. Magic, welcome to the Bulldogs podcast, mate. It's such a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, no, it's great to be on board. So, looking forward to it, having a chat.
How are you? What's it is.
Oh,
it is
you must have been.
nickname.
Yeah, you must have been. That's a nice one. We talk about nicknames a lot on this podcast, and if Magic's one of them, you're happy with that, aren't you, Bob?
Yeah. Well, you generally don't get to pick your own, but if I could have picked my own, it would have been Magic. So you're up in the top end, Madge. What's how's life for you guys up there at the moment? We're all in different spots at the moment, but Melbourne, we're in lockdown. How's life in Darwin?
No, we've been pretty blessed, I guess. You know, right across Australia, we're probably the area that's been very fortunate. So we had a small period there where we had a bit of a lockdown, but that ended pretty quickly. I think it was after 3 weeks thereabouts, and then back to normality for us. So it's pretty cool.
Madge, there's heaps of footy stuff that I want to talk to you about, and I know Marcus has got a few questions. We don't have that much time, but can we take you back in the time machine back to when you were a young fella playing at the Bulldogs at Footscray back in the 80s? What are your memories of that time in your life like?
Oh, pretty special, but very daunting at the time. I was a very skinny 16-year-old that left the territory. I was the first Territorian to go direct to the VFL back then in the 80s. Everything was different for me, Murph and Bont. It was I had to train a bit harder, of course. I was surrounded by players that were just as good, if not better than me. So you virtually had to start again at 16 years of age. The change of lifestyle, the eating, the culture, the weather, of course, and then on top of that, the racism reared its ugly head as well. It was something that was foreign to me as well, so it was all a bit of a shock for me, but I adjusted, I think, quite quickly. After the first year there, I ended up putting on 10 kilo of muscle. I just lived in the gym. I almost crushed my chest one night when I first left the bench press. I had guys like Rick Kennedy and Kelvin Templeton, just pushing out I think it was the pyramid sets. They were just smacking the bench press, and I thought, Jesus. So I came back the next day and tried it out and almost crushed my chest. So I thought, no, I'm going to put the work in to get to that.
Footscray was a pretty rough neighbourhood back then, Madge. Were you driving, or would you catch the train? And how did the racism how were you confronted by that? Was it at the footy? Was it just in the street? What was that?
It was most places I went to, actually. It was amongst my teammates as well. We'd be at the Rising Sun Hotel and they'd be telling jokes about, did you hear about the Irishman? Did you hear about the Scottishman? Did you hear about the Abo? It was just like, whoa, hang on a minute. So I was pretty uncomfortable. I was a Lone Ranger. And at 17 years of age, I just turned 17 when I got down there, and I just stood up and said, enough's enough. I'm a proud Aboriginal person. This is not going to continue on. So, once that was knocked on the head, it was fine with my teammates. But in society, it was certainly different for me. I think when I grew up in Darwin, I was touted as a young football star in the media, and then I get to Melbourne and I'm a young Aboriginal football star. So it was you sort of label straight away, which is fine. But to get the backlash from supporters at different times and have 8 to 10-year-old, 13-year-old kids run on the ground after the first siren and abuse you, it wasn't a nice feeling. So and I worked it out quickly. I knew where it was coming from. You know, not only the kids, it was adults as well. But I think all my home games, I actually got escorted off the ground by the senior sergeant of the local police.
Wow.
Just to make sure I was safe and other people were safe, Murph. Right?
We know, I can only imagine. But like we know, we know the struggle, you know, goes on, and you know, we're not there yet, and but are you heartened by the progress we've made in the ensuing years, not just in football, but in the country?
Oh, I think right across the board. Yeah, I am. There's traction there. We just need to continue on with that, and the traction is through education. It's nothing else. It's just being heard, you know, by teammates and people around the footy clubs, and then it should filter out in a positive manner. But you know, for me, it wasn't being filtered out in a positive manner when you let things go and then they educate another 10 people who educate another 100 people, and it's not nice. But look, it's positive at the moment. It's as good as it's ever been, but it's still out there. We know that it's never going to be a perfect world, I say.
Yeah.
Who helped you when you were sort of younger? You said you moved across quite young. Was there anyone that you sort of found you came across during your time that helped sort of support you, or a bit of a role model in that sense at the football club, or probably moving across is obviously a big move at a young age? Who sort of helped support you throughout that time?
Oh, it was probably a guy the same age as me, Steve McPherson, super. He would have been the one that sort of connected with me straight up. I played nationals against him. He was a great player. And we connected straight away. He'd come across from Tassie with his brother Rod. And, we connected straight away. We went out one night and got into a bit of a blue, and you know, we finished it off, and he was right there with me. So, and that was through racism. But the main man, along with Super, was Dougie Hawkins. Yeah, he was the one that took me under his wing, so to speak. And, you know, I can recall before I got drafted, I knew nothing about the Bulldogs. I used to watch the footy on the winners and just dreamt about seeing the green grass and the muddy ovals and watching these big bodies. You know, that was the elite footy going around Australia. So that was my dream, to be the best. And to get to the club and see Dougie Hawkins, who I'd seen in a Fitzroy versus Footscray game at Junction Oval. He played on Mickey Conlon. I seen the little tank, Mickey Conlon, and number 12, I think he was, and Hawk was number 7. I thought, geez, that number 7 moves well for the Bulldogs. Who is he? I looked up in the record, and it was Doug Hawkins. And then, lo and behold, I get drafted 12 months later, or picked up on a Form 4. And the first player I met, Doug Hawkins. And I said, I know you. So I watched you play, champ. But from day one, Bont, he was the man that looked after me, and I dare say you guys are the same, Bont. You know, any young guys come to the club, you guys take them under their wing, and it's needed, big time. So, you know, that's culture. It's footy club culture. Yeah. So you guys know that.
What was the footy like itself, Magic? You came from the territory. You're a proud Territorian, dreaming of playing in the VFL, and you mentioned that, you know, the bog grounds and the bigger bodies. Did you take to it pretty quickly, or was it a bit of an adjustment?
Oh, a little bit of an adjustment, Murph. I played on dry grounds up here, and I was playing senior footy at 15, so I was a bit of a receiver. So I received the footy. When I was a junior, I was always getting the footy. I always had the footy, and then I had to readjust. You know, I played senior footy. I was receiving a fair bit off the older players, and then I got to the under 19s with the Bulldogs, and the first 5 games I really struggled. So I rang one of my idols up in Dale, and I said, mate, I'm struggling. I played senior footy with him. He said, mate, do what you do. Go and get the footy. Don't wait for it. Go and get the footy. So from there on in, I just went and got the footy. And, I was fine after that. But certainly the boggy ovals and the cold weather, the winter, sorted me out. But, that's why I had to fatten up, Murph.
Well, it hasn't got any warmer down here. You made a big impact at the Bulldogs, Magic. I speak to a lot of Bulldog supporters, and your name sort of floats, you know, in the ether. There's a real fondness for you. But Marcus was just doing a bit of research on you, and what jumped off the page was the gap between your time at the Bulldogs and then when you went to the Brisbane Bears. Marcus, do you wanna ask Magic about that?
Well, just obviously I think you had a year off at one point. Maybe I was sort of more curious than anything to know what happened during that sort of period.
Well, I had a year off, brother. I had 16 years at the AFL level, and I missed 6 years through injuries.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's basically the reason I got moved on from the Bulldogs. They tried to keep me there for to be a number, I guess. But at the time, I was a deputy vice captain of the club, and the games that I did play, I played reasonably pretty well. You know, I was playing okay. I still had the belief, and I could compete with the best of them. And then Terry Wheeler came on board, and it went a bit pear-shaped. He had new ideas and new ways of doing things, and one in, all in, and get on the track. And my body wasn't ready for that. I think my last 4 years at the Dogs, I spent 9 years there. My last 4 years, I played 33 games in 4 years. So, and I was a leader of the club. So it was frustrating for me and frustrating for everybody else. And then I got drafted in the 91 pre-season draft. I had 10 clubs wanting to pick me up because I'd come back to Darwin. I dropped a bit of weight. I had a bad ankle injury. Dropped a bit of weight, and then 10 clubs said they were going to pick me up. And I said to Robert Walls, I said, if you pick me, you need to look after me. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, I can't, the rigours of AFL footy, the training, the preparation, I can't handle it with everybody else. So I need to, do it myself. I know I can do it. And he said, look, I'm willing to take you on board and have a crack at it. And my first year there, I did my own training. I did my own training for 6 years with the Bears. And out of the 7 years I was there, the first year, I ended up fifth in the Brownlow. We won 3 games for the year. And it won the best and fairest. And I had tried to train the next year, broke down again, and then pushed from the middle of the ground to the back pocket, the half-back flank, where Nathan Buckley came on board for that year. And I was lucky enough to beat him for the BNF as well. He'd like to think he should have won it, but sorry about it. But, I was lucky to do that, and also held leadership roles at the Bears as well, Bonch, for 4 years. I was vice captain. I was deputy vice for a year as well. So my time there was great, but my time at the Bulldogs was great as well, I wanted to be a one-club player. Didn't want to leave. I went there from 16 to 17. Just turned 17 as I got there, and I was a boy. I grew into a man. So to move on was pretty difficult.
Yeah, because you've achieved a lot. Sorry, I was just going to ask. There was one other thing I was really interested just to see how it was I sort of read that you captained the Indigenous All-Stars team too, and then I think you ended up coaching it maybe a few years later down the track. How did the experiences sort of differ? And I'm sort of keen to hear who are the players that you sort of rolled around with. I think it was in 95 that you played, that you were playing with, and what sort of that experience was like.
Yeah, I think it was 94, I reckon it was. 94, 95, thereabouts. No, that was awesome. And that game came about because of racism, It reared its ugly head, and at the time, the Collingwood president, the comment was made that
Alan
McAllister, if Indigenous players conduct themselves like white people, they'll get respected, which was pretty disgraceful. And then, then the game was brought about up in Darwin. 17,000 people, Indigenous colours all around the ground. It was one of the most special moments. And we won the game, which was insignificant, really. But just to be part of that, and that Indigenous side was players from each state, and not necessarily all AFL players. There was a few local Darwin boys. There was a guy from the ACT, a guy from Tasmania. So it sort of covered Australia. And then the next, I think it was the following 3 All-Star games. Every 2 years they played. I coached the 3 of those as well. So, to coach all those players that have come through over those 6 years, it was some special players. Special moments, Bob.
Yeah, I can imagine. Magic, just even a glancing sort of look at, your career and life and time in footy, the thing that jumps off the page is leadership roles. Everywhere you've been, you've become a leader. You're a proud Territorian, captain of the Indigenous team, coach of the Indigenous team. What does it mean for you in this week? So it's the Doug Nicholls Round, and there's the Dreamtime game in Darwin. What does that mean to a man like you?
Oh, I think it's pretty special, but it's just a shame that there's only going to be 5,500 people there, because of this COVID stuff.
Yeah.
At a guess, I think 5,500. We can only fit 15 in or 12 or 13. I'm not sure how much we fit in there now.
Yeah.
Because there's a few things that have been built since. But no, it's significant. It's pretty special. It'll just be a shame that, you can't get all people through the gates.
Yeah.
I know there'd be a lot of people that come from communities, surrounding areas that would drive 1,000k, 2,000k to get here.
Yeah.
And not to be able to go into the ground would be pretty disappointing for them. But I think they're putting a few screens up around the territory as well, so they can watch it on the big screen. So, no, but pretty special, Murph and Bond. The game's come a long way. The racial vilification code of conduct was brought in 1995, and it was after the Mickey Long Monkhurst saga. And also, Nicky pulling his jumper up, Nicky Winmar, of course, pulling his jumper up. They were pivotal moments, I guess. And, to be heavily part of the decision-making for the code of conduct, people aren't aware, Murph. I was actual spokesperson for the Indigenous players. I had a meeting with, at the time, Tony Peake, Curly Austin, Rod Austin, and Ian Collins. They flew me down from Brisbane because I'd been part of an article that was written where I mentioned that we were going to start naming players that were repeat offenders, and they weren't happy with it. And they said, what are we going to do about it? So I said, I don't know what you're going to do about it, but you need to do something because this is our workplace. We're not happy about it as far as being Indigenous players goes. And then they said, well, what do we do? I said, I don't know. And then I said, quickly suggested, and this hasn't been on the record, Murph and Bont, and I'm not happy about it, but my suggestion at the time was get any nationality in here, any walk of life, and they'll feel the same way as we do, any ethnic background. And get Liberatore in here, get Jose Romero in here, ask them how they feel. And then 10 days later, we had a round table discussion, and to a person around the table, they felt exactly the same way as us, as Indigenous players. And that's how the Code of Conduct came about. It was about equality. It wasn't just for Indigenous players. And that gave the AFL the opportunity to be able to do that. That was the only reasoning. That was just by, just bring them in, bring them all in. We all feel the same way. It's just unacceptable. It's our workplace.
Well, it's a pretty pivotal moment in the history of the game, and there's a lot of players and a lot of people who can be thankful of you and that generation of players, Magic. Mate, I always love just sitting at your knee and hearing your stories. I always feel better for having a chat with you. I wish we had so much more time. I know we'll definitely get you back on the podcast at some stage, but from a couple of, I'm an old Bulldog. Bont's the king of the Bulldogs, but we love having you as part of the Bulldog family. Always good to chat. Enjoy this week. It's great to see footy back in the NT. There might only be, a third of the crowd of the capacity, but as the Paul Kelly song that, you got friends in the south, we'll all be watching as proud footy fans and love the spirit of the people in the territory and what they bring to footy. So thank you so much, as always, for coming on the podcast. It's great to see your face, great to hear your voice, and we'll keep in touch and good to see you.
Great to chat with two legends, and it's nice to be still part of being spoken about, I guess, after I think it's been 30 years. There you go, 55 now, boys. So to be still talking to people that are heavily involved and legends of the club, it's an honour. So thank you.
Pleasure for us too, mate. Great to chat, Madge.
Cheers.
You're a legend.
Cheers, boys.